Hi, my name is Lena or Lee Robertson. I use they, them, theirs pronouns. I'm the outgoing president of Vanderbilt University Secular Student Alliance in Nashville, Tennessee, and I've been president of our chapter here since fall of 2018, so about 3 years. So for me, I became an atheist and consequently secular in high school. That was around the time that I realized I was queer, although I hadn't realized that I was trans and non-binary just yet. But my experiences and perspective as a queer and trans person certainly influence how I approach issues relating to secularism. I saw that the church I grew up in did not accept my queerness, did not accept my transness. I had already known before then that I wasn't religious, but I realized as well at that time that I also wanted to claim a mantle of secularism. So, also important to my relationship with secularism is my racial and cultural heritage. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about how, as a person of Afro Caribbean descent, my ancestors had their historical faith and religion supplanted by Christianity. It feels particularly difficult for me to see Christianity heralded above any other particular religion in government, not only because I'm a proponent and an advocate for religious pluralism, but also because much of my own culture has been lost to white Christian colonialism. So, what does it mean to me with these identities to be a secular student? It means acting in such a way that religious pluralism, equal respect for people of all religious backgrounds with no preference for any one group, is achieved. But it also means pursuing queer liberation, trans liberation, women's liberation, liberation for black, brown, indigenous people, and other people of color, including Asian and Asian American folks, class solidarity, disability justice, climate justice, my convictions about other areas of social justice, and my secularism and atheism are totally inseparable. A ton of marginalized groups have been disadvantaged or suffered hate partially because of that Eurocentric, Christian centric concept of what is right and good and worth pursuing versus what is wrong and dirty and deserving of subjugation. So I really firmly believe that there's no higher power watching over us and guiding us on the right path. And I believe that there's no reincarnation, there's no second chances at this very short life that we have here on earth. And those beliefs imbue me with a deep sense of responsibility to the people and the world around me to do better. So I haven't always felt welcome in the secular community, admittedly. I think because of how central the church is to the black community and how far women are subjugated in some religions, it's hard to find secular or non-religious community that isn't mainly just white men. White men have a lot more freedom to develop their own identities and forge their own paths in society in general, but also specifically in religious communities. But I do think that's changing. Me being openly secular, I hope, is one small step on that path to encourage other people of color and other non-men to join the community. So the way I'm kind of hoping the secular student movement will change going forward is to lean more into these issues of intersectionality. A lot of secular folks, especially students who are getting their post-secondary education, such as myself, we have a lot of privilege that we could be doing a better job of leveraging to benefit the more marginalized of us. Yeah, that needs to change. Debate and discussion about whether or not God exists is cool and all, but like, what are you doing to be a better ally, a better advocate, a better accomplice? How are you bettering the world around us? We need to be working with grassroots political and activist groups to affect real change in the United States. We need to be putting our money where our mouth is, and I think that that passion for liberation of more marginalized groups should really be the heart of any real secular movement. Thank you.
My name is Twyla Colburn, and I go to David Douglas High School. I'm pretty new to SSA, but I hope to eventually help foster a community of secular students or start a chapter at school. So, when it comes to secular students, actually, I'd say not being religious just allows so many barriers between students and knowledge to be broken down. You know, secularism is a direct result of thinking deeply from a critical point of view, and that mindset clearly benefits people in almost any learning effort. But then there's also this interesting point of unlearning that I see as a helpful tool for secularism. Right now, because religion is so widespread, it's essentially teaching all these beliefs, and secularism is the product of unlearning them or never learning them and making it back to the curious and eager to learn sides of us that are more natural and useful, especially right now, for example, when we're fighting climate change, and secularism at least helps in removing the issue people have with believing that it's happening. On top of this, though, the unlearning really goes hand in hand with acceptance when it comes to harmful and oppressive ideas, which are clearly often taught by religion. As a queer person, it's easy for me to see and feel the spectrum from religious people with ideas of heteronormativity and the gender binary to religious people who are trying to be more accepting, and then to seeing how many unbiased people are secular. And so, similar to how the negative ways toxic masculinity affects men are rooted in the patriarchy, and how racism, no matter where it's coming from or directed, is a product of white supremacy, so much of the anger directed at people who aren't heterosexual or cisgender stems from religion, even if it's coming from a secular person or someone who is also negatively affected by religion. And so the harmful aspects of religion can be unlearned, but that doesn't mean people aren't still buying into the system of belief that has caused people to be demonized for things they can't control. And to me, this is what a secular issue is. A problem that can most effectively be solved by secularism, or at least the unlearning of harmful religious beliefs. So this really encompasses so many problems that cause oppression, disbelief in facts, or division of people, which is clearly a very long list. And I'd say this is where the secular movement is headed, or at least should be, is focusing its efforts on the parts of religion that are actively damaging, since some people might not be willing to give up all their beliefs, but might be able to let go of the damaging ones. And hopefully, this would allow people who've been negatively affected or excluded by religion to take an active place in changing the aspects that have hurt them before. And so this might even lead to people realizing that their religion is fundamentally flawed, and seeing this perspective might help them question their belief. And so moving forward, I think it should be a key goal of the secular student movement to isolate the harmful aspects of religion and highlight the problems they cause. And that might hopefully inspire the critical mindset that comes with secularism, and hopefully push the questioning of faith to a larger scale. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Jody. I'm the founder of the Secular Student Alliance chapter at the University of Manitoba. I have aimed to build a community for secular students on campus, where they can interact with one another and find a shared sense of meaning and belonging. I plan to stay involved with the chapter even after my graduation, because I believe it is important for secular students to have a well-established community and network of support on campus. I named my chapter Literate Independent Thinkers, or LIT for short. I chose those words because, yes, they abbreviate to a catchy acronym, but also because those words encapsulate what being a secular student means to me. My scientific perspective has heavily influenced what I hope to promote in my communities through secular activism. I hope to promote scientific literacy and critical thinking within the general public. Healthy skepticism is important in a day and age where, as a society, we are bombarded with misinformation on a regular basis. To make informed decisions, people need the ability to understand information and know how to use it. I have a desire to educate the public about how to critically evaluate information and sources, which likely stems from my own enjoyment of scientific writing and educating. I really enjoy teaching science labs at the University of Manitoba, which is a big part of who I am and what I do at the moment. Ultimately, my worldview is shaped by all aspects of my identities and roles in life. For example, several of my identities include student, friend, teacher, scientist, atheist, humanist, and so on. I am a secular student who approaches activism primarily through my scientific perspective. My undergraduate studies in science have solidified and complemented the growth of my secular worldview. A concept that was important for understanding my own position as an atheist was my understanding of a null hypothesis as the default logical position in research. Atheism is simply a default logical position in the absence of supportive evidence for the existence of a God. Scientists must enter experiments open-mindedly so that they can minimize bias in the collection and analysis of data. For example, confirmation bias can be minimized by blinding research studies. So just as we should not enter a scientific experiment believing that the results will be significant before experimentation, we should not enter belief in a God without appropriate verification. In closing, I would like to mention that one day, I hope to be a medical doctor so I can help spread health and well-being, especially mental health, by promoting secularism on a public platform. Healthcare workers are expected to be religiously neutral. So based on my own understanding, secularism is the logical default approach of medical practice. The secular worldview can be brought with you into any career or future endeavor that you may have. Whether you talk about your secular views or not, they will influence your actions, and you can be an ambassador for the ideology of secularism in your communities. I'm relatively new to the secular community, and I hope to increase my involvement as time goes on. I encourage all of you to get more involved with the secular community as well, either online or on campus, because so far, I have found that the community has provided me with encouragement, support, and meaning in my life. Remember that unique perspectives and identities can contribute to your role as an intersectional activist for secularism. Thanks for listening.
Hi, my name is Shawn Rivera. I started my SSA involvement in high school and went on to become the president of the SSA at UTSA, so University of Texas San Antonio. And from there, went towards intersectional activism, and now I work in a public elected office. I would stress the intersectionality, and I know that's probably a common answer. But just to understand that everyone has their story, that led them to this. Whether you started out with those beliefs, or whether like many of us, we started, maybe with more of a theist background, and kind of found our way from there. I know that a lot of the socio-political opinions among the secular movement, we've definitely found in the last 4 or so years. Definitely not a monolith. I say, like with all things, it is important, of course, to find common ground, but it's also important, to understand, where your personal limits are. It's important to go out of your comfort zone, but it's also important to, understand the need for, as I mentioned, for intersectionality, accepting that secularism overlaps with all of these other issues, that all these, that, a variety, that a wide swath of marginalized communities have to deal with every day. Everyone has different, I wouldn't say, not necessarily qualities. I'm trying to remember exactly what the word I'm looking for. But demographics that they belong to that, are inescapable, things that you can't hide, things that you can't run away from, and things that there are societal repercussions to being part of those groups. And to understand that, depending on, what that, collection of demographics, you belong to is, especially if a lot of them are, in the more privileged positions, to understand that your secular identity, although extremely important, and although there is, a very large aspect of marginalization, is not at the core of everything. Um, Everyone is more than that. After 2016, I think I started to realize, because I grew up with a pretty great life, and very supportive household. So I was able to overlook a lot of the demographics I also overlapped with, even though I had a lot of rough experiences because of those. But I think it was something that I didn't want to think about. I think I was in a place in my life where I wasn't being confronted with those challenges every day, because I was in I was in college, um, and I was lucky where I was really in an environment where uh, I think the difficulties were less present than they were in other stages of my life. So I think a lot of folks that I knew really dove into their identity as an atheist being the sole marginalized group, or the concept of religion being the sole source of inequity and dogma, and uh, lapses in logic. Uh, so they'd really pin that as the top issue that everything else springs from. And it's important to know that all of these societal issues uh, genuinely would exist simply due to human nature, with or without the prevalence of religious belief. Well, I think just to get out there, offer yourself as a resource. You don't necessarily have to try to spread the word, or inject your own priorities into other people's movements, or try to reframe other folks' movements as just an extension of yours. I think just support a lot of the other initiatives that are going out there unconditionally, as long as they align with your values. And the rest comes afterwards. So there are a lot of overlaps between a lot of progressive or justice-based movements, and a lot of the members of those movements, and our own, or the secular movement. So I think just don't be there to co-opt anything. Build friendships between individuals, between your groups and other groups, and assume best intentions, and try your best to look for the best in people. um, and I think there's a lot of room for collaboration. Creating and maintaining collaborative relationships between organizations. I know this is a somewhat of a redundant answer, since I know that one of my past answers is pretty similar. But when you approach their initiative or their goal, or the thing that they want to see change, uh, you know, do it in earnest. See the value of the thing they're trying to accomplish. Recognize that it is just as valid as your primary goal. Um, where don't approach them so they can bolster your movement. Approach them to offer your services, or offer, the helpful attributes of your movement, to support theirs. So I think that's one thing that's very important. It needs to be a symbiotic relationship, not necessarily a somewhat parasitic one. Um, that will allow them, the opportunity to organically discover, the positive attributes of your movement. That's where you'll start. encouraging a lot of this crossover of membership and involvement and future collaboration that you yourself may not take an active role in facilitating, much like you know uh, the overlap between secular student organizations with uh, you know uh, reproductive justice, racial justice, environmental, LGBT plus, and so on. At least in my university, uh, I think the student body was already kind of primed to kind of coalesce, and or for those who were part of those kind of circles.
Hello, my name is Maddie Blackburn. I am the president of the Secular Student Alliance at William & Mary Law School. To my knowledge, I think we're one of the few SSA organizations at a law school at all. And so much of what I'm going to talk about right now is going to be kind of related to what it's like to be a secular student in a legal educational environment. I decided to start my Secular Student Alliance last year, and we just got up and running in January. And I honestly did it because I think it's important to have a space that kind of fills the gap when people leave religion and lose like the fellowship and social benefit that comes from being a part of a religious community. And I also thought it was important to express secular viewpoints and make it known that there are secular people in the legal field that do care very much about the separation of church and state and the secularization of our government. So that's why I started my organization. One thing that I personally have found, I think, a bit frustrating being someone with a science background. I have a biochemistry background, and someone who considers themselves a skeptic is that the legal field doesn't look at evidence in the same way that science looks at evidence. So in science, you basically gather information, obviously, to find the truth and get as close as you can to the truth. Whereas in the law, things that would not be considered facts by like an objective scientific standard are considered facts depending on what sort of case you're dealing with. And with a lot of religious liberty cases, the facts of the case are not actual facts, but the law will treat them like facts. So, for example, take Masterpiece Cake Shop, right, where the baker was asserting religious liberty. His right to express his religion is a legal fact that plays into the outcome of that case. Whereas the concept, like religious liberty in and of itself, is not an objective fact by like scientific standards. So I think it's been interesting as a skeptic and someone who values objective evidence to make policy decisions and contribute to the government. I think it's been frustrating to learn as part of my law school experience that what's considered evidence by legal standards is very different. But I think it's also been a good challenging experience to learn how to embrace that and then apply my skepticism and my approach to evidence to my arguments.
Thank you for joining our panel, Be an Intersectional Activist. I hope you found some things to take away with you today to improve your activist strategies moving forward.